Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Stop Podcast. As always, this is Brianna and Lindy, and guess who's back? Chris! We're finally all back together. Today we have an awesome episode for you. It's a special edition. We are interviewing one of the most amazing content creators in our field, F1FantasyHQ. So hold tight and we're going to get him on.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today. If you could give us a quick little introduction about who you are, like your name, how old are you, where you're from.
Sure. So I'm Adam. I'm 37. I'm coming to you from Massachusetts in the good old US of A. So I lead an F1 fantasy content platform called F1 Fantasy HQ. I'm across Twitter, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and a whole lot more. I'm also one half of the Fantasy Formula podcast, which I do in partnership with my friends at F1FantasyHQ and some other great creators. And we have 2 episodes that we air before every race week. The first one is early in the week, where we give you a review of the previous race and then a preview of the upcoming race and some of the best fantasy strategies for your team. And then we have a live show 1 hour before lineups lock, where we take listeners' feedback and questions live before they set their lineups and before everything locks for that race week. So 2 really exciting episodes every week.
Okay, wow, that's awesome.
I need that. I need to tune in.
I know, wow, I need to watch some of that. What inspired you to start creating content around F1 fantasy leagues?
It's a great question. So I first started playing F1 Fantasy 2 years ago and ended up finishing in the top 1,000 in the world. So inside the top 0.1%, I said, oh, wow, that's interesting. I wonder, is this something I've got a real knack for? And so when I showed up for the start of last season, I was looking for content like what I consume when I play fantasy NFL. I was looking for long form content of here's how everyone's doing, here's what their outlook looks like for the rest of the season. And I just wasn't finding that. So I said, I wonder if I wrote this, if the F1 fantasy community would really take to it. So I started my own website, I started building up my socials, and it started growing really, really quickly. So my website had over 150,000 visitors in 2023. And then this year, F1 invited us to create a featured league in the F1 fantasy game. So when you go on, the Fantasy Formula is one of the top 7 or 8 leagues in the world with over 100,000 teams. And so this little idea I had at the start of last season has really blossomed into something really big.
Nice.
Wow.
How do you stay updated with F1 news to make more informed decisions on your fantasy teams, like Twitter or Instagram, or how do you stay updated?
So, like all of you, I probably spend a lot of time on social media and get most of my news from there. And then over time, I've curated it to some of the people that tend to be more reliable than others, trying to filter out some of the rumor from what's actually fact. And we have a technical correspondent on our show, Terry Widows from Coffee Corner Motorsport, and he has some really, really good news. It's always filtered so that it's totally accurate. He's never pushing rumors, and so I tend to trust his news more than anything else. And then luckily, on that live show right before lineups lock, Terry joins us and gives us some of that last minute news. So we set our teams with all the news in mind.
Gotcha. So you guys are filtering out a lot of that noise, and yeah,
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And there's definitely a lot of that, especially this time of year where things are starting to get quiet. There's definitely a lot of buzz, but not a lot of stuff we can work with.
Silly season. Yeah, fun silly season.
Gotta love
even
it.
sillier this week now that there's this revolution of people changing their F1 branded social media profiles. So that's been the silliest part of silly season this last week. So been keeping up with a lot of that fun.
Have they gotten you, or are you okay?
They have not gotten me, but I think I already had some things in motion that will probably see me making some changes in the next week or two anyway. So my website, I really like the point that I've grown it to, but also I don't have a lot of talents in web design and keeping up with it. Meanwhile, my friends at FanAmp, they have this beautiful website on fanamp.com. They're looking for more content to really bolster the space, and they have a bigger audience than me. So starting with Xanwar, I'm going to start moving all of my written content to their website. So that'll move me away from F1FantasyHQ.com. And then since I'm joining the FanAmp family, I'll probably move to something like FanAmp Fantasy HQ instead of F1 Fantasy HQ, and then I'll be totally copacetic with F1 moving forward.
That's smart. That's good. I know that was like crazy. Everybody just got blasted all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was for a while. You know, some people that have these identities that they've come to be known as for years and years, having to move away with it so suddenly. So my heart goes out to them for sure.
It's lame.
Absolutely.
It's kind of lame of
It
them for
is.
doing that.
It should have just been handled a little bit better in terms of not like a sudden slap in the face, but like a process to it. But I get it. Um, can you walk us through your process for selecting drivers and teams each weekend?
Absolutely. So we only have at the start of the season, your team has 100 million in cost cap to spend, and then over the course of the season, you might build your cost cap as drivers and constructors gain value. But everyone has between 100 and 130 million to play with, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
evenly spread that out amongst 5 drivers and 2 constructors. So each week, I look at how those drivers perform at a certain track, or some recent trends in the sport, just to see who is trending positively or negatively. So as hot as Red Bull started off the season, they certainly tailed off over the last 4 or 5 races. So it moved away from Red Bull and more into McLaren and Mercedes as they've really heated up. And then after that, you're trying to find some good, cheaper drivers that will score a lot of points. And so drivers like Kevin Magnussen leads the grid in overtakes. That's a big category in F1 Fantasy. So K-Mag's on a lot of my teams. Also, RB is starting to look a lot better with 3 straight top 10 performances out of either Sonoda or Ricardo. So I like the RB drivers in the second half as well. So typically I go for a hot driver at the top of the grid and then some high upside drivers in the middle of the grid too.
But what are some
Yeah.
common mistakes people make when managing their F1 fantasy teams? I know I tried it once and I maxed out my cap immediately trying to pick Lando and like all my favorite drivers, and then I have like no money left for solid teams. So I just don't think I'm good at it. I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah.
I'll tell you, there are 2 common mistakes that a lot of people make. The first one is that they just don't stay with it. And even if you play a team every single week from the start of the season through Abu Dhabi, you're still better than probably 70 or 80% of the teams that play. So many people give up because they say, I'm not going to win this league. I might as well just put all on my head. And then the other big thing is, like you said, Lindy, they pick a team with their heart instead of their head. They just pick their favorite drivers rather than who might score the most points week to week. So I always recommend that people start the season with 2 teams. One with all of your favorite drivers that you can cheer for and really enjoy, and then one that's a little more strategic that's trying to play the game as best you can. Because often it's those less likable drivers that are the best assets in F1 Fantasy. I know Lance Stroll has been a really big asset these last 2 years, but nobody's really pulling for Lance on Sunday.
Poor Lance.
I had a question. So how do you balance choosing your F1 drivers based on performance versus their popularity, which you kind of alluded to as the league, as you form the draft or whatever?
It's a great question. So we can see F1 Fantasy publishes statistics on the most selected drivers in the game. And so based off of that, you can go one of 2 ways. You can say, I'll either follow the crowd so that if I have a bad week, most people are having a bad week too. Or you can say, I'm a little bit behind. I want to come up with a slightly different strategy that if it hits, it'll really have me stand out amongst the group. And so I try to balance those 2 things and then pair that with how a driver typically performs in that circuit to make my decision. I want to follow the crowd versus doing something unique. Right now, the top
Okay.
driver in the game is Alex Albon, and Max Verstappen is number 2 at 41% selected. So you can see some interesting trends. Both drivers at the top and the bottom of the grid are the most selected.
It's interesting. I know I tried to pick Max one time, and surprisingly, he did not win me much that weekend. What strategies have worked best for you in achieving like a high-ranking fantasy league? Because clearly you know how to build one.
I think the big thing when you're planning your team is we have these 6 power-up chips you can only use one time throughout the season. And I find that using the biggest chips on sprint weekends has been the most helpful, because on sprint weekends you have 3 events that you can earn fantasy points. So if you use, for example, the 3x DRS boost, where you can triple the score of one driver and move your 2x boost to another driver, you'd want to do that where you have 3 events to score points. So saving those for one of the upcoming sprint weekends at Coda or Interlagos for the second half would be a great strategy. And then also, I like to just follow the trends of the sport, and some of the other content creators are out there. And typically those that are really successful at the game, they put out a strategy that tends to work. So if you see multiple strategists like myself suggesting a lineup, those are the kinds of teams that you should try to angle yourself into and stand out from the rest of your league.
So let's say you have an unexpected driver change. How do you approach that, like mid-season?
We had this last year with Liam Lawson coming on and off the grid for a little bit with Daniel Ricciardo. And what happened was the new driver will come in at the same price as the driver he's replacing, but as a different driver card in the game. So last year when Danny Rick got hurt, we had to take Danny Rick out of our lineups and put Liam Lawson in. They were the same price, but you had to make that extra transfer on your team. And some people may have already used their free transfers of the week at the time that we realized that Danny Rick was going to miss some action. So it was a little bit disruptive, but they do put a new driver in there for you so you can settle out. So we keeping our eyes open for it. Checo or Logan Sargent find themselves out of a seat in the next 2 weeks, so I'd be scrambling in the same way.
Oh yeah, solid point.
That's interesting because I had a side question. So you select drivers going into each race weekend? Because I play fantasy too, but it's just a friend group, and we don't use a website or anything to do it. It's just like a bunch of buddies of mine. But we select all of our drivers and then like one team prior to the season. So each of us gets 2 drivers because there's 5 of us, so that gets us all the drivers. And then each of us selects a team, but we can't select the top 3 teams from the previous season. So I got screwed with, I think it was Mercedes, or I mean McLaren, I forget now. But so you guys select drivers going into each week?
Yes. And so this is very similar to daily fantasy sports. If you play daily, like DraftKings for fantasy NFL, where you have a budget and theoretically every team in the world could have the same team. You just have a budget and then you can allocate it amongst the entire driver and constructor pool. And so that's how they're able to manage the same, because there's 2.3 million teams worldwide. So they had to come up with a way to make it work with everybody at once. I haven't quite seen an F1 league quite like this, because I'd love to see one that's full season where you draft drivers and constructors and you stick with
going
them.
blind.
Really cool.
Going in blind. Yeah, it's dumb. It's just a thing. We just decided to do it that way. But
wait, I have a side question too. You said that there are 2.3 million teams in the F1 Fantasy League. So, okay, also, I have another question. So, I don't know if this is dumb or not, but you said you finished the top 1,000 at one point. What do you get? Do you get anything if you finish like top 10, top 5, number 1, or is it just like bragging rights? Yes. I don't know.
So for me, finishing just within the top 1,000, it's only bragging rights. But the top prize in the global league are a pair of paddock passes for a race the following season. So it's one of the biggest prizes in all of fantasy. Second place gets a pair of 3-day passes to any race in the world the following season, and third place gets a big gift card to the F1 store. And then F1 just announced a second half league. So for anyone that might have struggled in the first half or wants to start playing fantasy for the first time, there's a new mini league called Zandvoort to Abu Dhabi, and first place in that league is 3-day passes to a race next year. So great opportunity for people to buy back.
That's awesome. Would you
that
happen to know
right
into... Oh, you
go ahead, Lenny.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you happen to know? Okay, you go, Chris.
No. I wanna hear the question.
I know. Now I'm interested.
Do you know like the statistics of like the chance of being number 1, number 2, number 3? Like, is it like 1 in a million or?
I don't know the exact statistics. That's a good question. And you need a lot of really good things to bounce your way throughout the year. Think about all the calamities we've had this F1 season. There was the Ferrari double DNF at Canada. There was the Haas double disqualification double DNF at Monaco. George's disqualification at Spa. You have to survive all of these moments to be one of the top teams in the world, and it takes a lot of compounding luck to do that. So it's extremely rare, but the few that make it to the top get rewarded pretty well.
I was going to say that kind of tied into the previous statement you made. What's your best advice for a newcomer coming into F1 Fantasy, and kind of the guidance you would, with your experience and knowledge, that you would guide a newcomer?
I think the big thing, like I mentioned a moment ago, would just be to stay with it for the rest of the season. Because even if you're not doing a good job with it, you're not posting the best results possible. You're at least learning, and that can build you up as you take on the game the following season. But then also just making sure you spread out your budget so that you have a few of those top drivers and a few of those top constructors. I think people try to spread out their teams a little too evenly. I like to have some top drivers and a Logan Sargent or a Sauber driver on my team so that you get a lot of points from one guy and a little bit of risk from the other rather than a whole bunch of mediocre drivers in the middle. That's typically how I start my teams off. And then also for new players too, feel free to watch along on F1 TV because that group has their own F1 Fantasy League as well. So in the pre-race shows, they'll talk about some of their strategies and some of their progress throughout the year. And we've been lucky enough to have 3 of the people from that league on our show sharing some of their strategies. So you can look back to our interviews with Laura Winter or Alex Brundle or Chris McCarthy, and they can tell you a little bit about how they started with the game and their strategies to get to the top in their league too.
Okay.
That's
Good
awesome.
advice.
Yeah,
Good
I know she's
advice.
killing it. She's always killing it in her league. Like she's always like the amount of points she has is crazy.
It is so
She's so
funny to
good.
talk to Laura. So she was in last place last year, and now she's in first. And when we asked her if there was any smack talk going on behind the scenes with their F1 fantasy progress, she said, "Oh yeah, it's all coming from me. I come to from worst to first. I'm letting them all know." And she was calling out specific people who are so mad to see her in first place. But it's so wonderful to see Laura thriving with it. I mean, we saw her commentating for the Olympics. Now she's doing some cycling commentating. She's just everywhere right now. So more Laura's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. She always does an excellent job. So we've talked about newcomers, right? And top teams and top drivers, but how do you handle underperforming drivers or teams when, things start to change or the league, I mean, we always know like the season is just going to be at the bottom. But so how do you like handle that when you're picking your team?
That's a great question because when you see a team or a driver underperform for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, you're trying to figure out, is this the start of a decline and are they really lacking? Or is this just a fluke, maybe bad setup for a track or a bad fit? When we saw this 2 times pretty recently, one was with Ferrari. They started to fall off with their new upgrades. And we were trying to figure out, is this a change for Ferrari and now they're more in the midfield, or was it just a bad race or two? Those teams that jumped off of Ferrari early and into Mercedes scored a lot more points and built their cost cap a lot more in the month of July. And so I was able to move out of them pretty quickly because they burnt me so bad in Canada. I just sort of, as a reaction, moved all the way away from Ferrari and it worked out for me. But others held on to them for too long. And then I got caught holding on to the Red Bull constructor a little bit too long because I figured, oh, they're fast at this track, or in the last race, Max took a grid penalty, so it's going to have a lot of overtakes. Then in Checo both have no new power units, so they should look really good, and they still were a little disappointing. So it's a fine line we have to walk between not quitting on a good asset too early, but also not holding on to something that's clearly fallen off. So it's a little bit of luck and a little bit of intuition to get you there.
Preach. You're talking to these two are Ferrari fans. I love Ferrari as a constructor, but I feel like the team as a whole is just making piss poor decisions all the time. So, and Bree is a huge Ferrari fan, so I mean, I get to talk so much smack. I love it.
I'm constantly in pain, so.
So I'll be right there alongside you next year. So I am Team Lewis. So I moved from McLaren to Mercedes, and I'll be moved from Mercedes to Ferrari with you next year. So we will be celebrating and crying together too.
Yay! Yes, lots of crying. I do it every weekend. It's great.
That's hilarious.
Chris, I was gonna say you should tell Adam what you call Charles.
Oh God.
Oh, Chuck Leclerc.
Chuckles.
That's his NASCAR name.
He calls him Chuckles.
Chuckles.
And I cry. Just hurts.
I was joking the other day. Here in the States, we never call someone Charles. Like, I don't think I've ever done that in my life before, but for him, he's always Charles. I've never
Yeah.
heard
That's
of
Chuck. That's Chuck.
I have to say it in a really, really bad British accent, and I don't know why. Every time, and it's really bad. It's embarrassingly bad.
I did the same thing last year with Dirty Air. I don't think I could say Dirty Air without the British accent like they do on Sky.
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
That's funny, yeah.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
So
Light
what's
as
your
rain.
take on, sorry, the lagging sometimes makes us like talk over each other. We never know like what's about to come through. So I was gonna say, what's your take on the importance of like team dynamics, like driver pairings when doing your fantasy league team?
Oh, that's a good question. I think an example of bad driver dynamics is what we see at Alpine, where they're constantly at each other's throat. They could be potentially colliding with each other. They already have these struggles with reliability and getting DNFs individually. So unless I have a really good reason to go with Gasly and Ocon, I tend to stay away from them. Otherwise, I don't think it plays too much of a role. As long as the individual driver is doing okay, I tend to look at them in a vacuum and just play the hot end.
Interesting. How do you decide what content to create around the F1 League experience and the dynamics of that? Like, how do you create content around it?
It started last year as what did I like from fantasy NFL that I wasn't seeing in the F1 fantasy space? And then I started to go that way. And then over time, as I started putting things out on different platforms, I started seeing patterns of which articles stuck and which ones didn't really get a lot of viewership, which videos got engagement, which ones didn't. So I tend to go around what works for people. Typically, content around these are the lineups that I think are good tends to do very well because people will check in at the end of the week. They just want some quick hits of what does this guy think I should run on my team? So I've been doing a fair bit of that. And then also trying to also spread myself out in as many platforms as possible just to get the good name of F1 Fantasy out there. So shooting some videos on TikTok that I make as a reel that it's based off of an article I wrote. So the same sort of content in different places. And then recently this year, I just submitted my third article to Sports Illustrated Fan Nation to try to get a longer form written piece in front of a bigger American audience. So trying to do as much as I can in a little bit of time.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I hope that they pick you. That sounds awesome.
I ran 2 articles earlier this season for them, and they seemed really happy with how they were taken by their viewership. So hopefully this third article goes as well.
Yay!
Well,
if I see it, I'm gonna like blast it everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you. That'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. So, what role does the community engagement really play with your content creation? I imagine it has like like all of us, the hand in hand. You do well when the community does well as well.
I'm so lucky that the F1 fantasy community is so kind. Unlike regular motorsport, where you could say, just for example, I'm not saying this for real, Daniel Ricciardo sucks. Someone can come and say, who are you? You've never driven a car before. Nobody cares about you. And then people start getting really nasty. But from an F1 fantasy perspective, if I say this popular driver isn't a good asset in F1 fantasy, and here are the statistics behind it, and here's how it's led, avoiding him has led to success on my teams, people generally engage with that a lot more kindly. And so the F1 fantasy community is all very kind and uplifting, and there's not a lot of really nasty talk that you see in some of the other F1 fan circles. So I'm very blessed that the community is as strong as it is. And then over time, it's just been a matter of getting other great content creators like yourselves into the game, because now I'm not just interacting with regular Twitter and Instagram users. I'm interacting with people that have a platform already. And so lifting each other up has been another really fun part of the season, is just engaging with other creators like yourself and having a community amongst ourselves.
Yeah, we all have the same vested interest at hand, so yeah, it makes sense that we all support each other. So yeah, I can see that.
That community's all been bonding around, why do we have to take F1 out of our name? So we're bonding for a whole different reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Luckily, we didn't get caught up in that BS, but
yeah, I would have cried big time. But I want to make a side comment because I think you're definitely right. F1 community is very different from any other community I've been involved in because I think as a musician, nobody talks to you. The gatekeep. It is throat, like I'm coming for you competition. And there are no friends. Everybody's an enemy. And then here, I've never had the experience quite like this where, you're creating content, we're all pushing each other's content forward. It's really refreshing.
It's been very nice. Yeah, it's one part just leveling up the game. You see people around you, you compare yourself to them, and then you try to get up to that standard. Now, all of a sudden, the content has really elevated over the last 2 years. And then also, too, I have these experiences where I'm on a show like this, and then one of us will put out content, and the other one is sharing it and celebrating it. And then all of a sudden, you start doing this with more and more creators, and that's how we get our names out there and build really meaningful relationships with other people in the community. So I'm super excited to go to my next race where some of you are all there and we can all high five in person and at one of these moments. Not behind the screen.
You gonna be at Coda?
Not Code, I'll be at Vegas.
I'm trying to go to Vegas.
She is
Oh
trying
my
to go to Vegas.
God.
I
Yeah,
can't stand
Bree's
this
trying to go.
or the race. Really.
I love me some Vegas. Oh, that's trouble. Yeah, Chris and I will be at Coda. We're trying to convince / kidnap / corrupt Lindy to come to Coda
Yeah,
with us.
they are. I think kidnap is the
And
correct
if you,
term
if,
here.
when you do go, I can definitely connect you with our friends at FantasyHQ too, because they'll have a meet and greet event where a bunch of their creators and some fans will get together at a bar somewhere and have some great prizes and stuff. And I think they're planning a couple of live shows there too. So if you want to be in the mix of some of that, I can definitely connect you with Greg and the team.
That'd be fun.
great.
Yeah,
sounds
I'm down.
like an idea.
That's like the one thing I've noticed.
And
like,
he said the
going
right
off of
word.
what-
He said bar.
Oh,
Bar.
but like
You
What,
had me at
Bree?
bar.
Yeah, I'm there.
Say less.
So are you all from Texas or are you spread around?
We're spread around.
Spread around. Well,
Well,
but
Bree
not
and I are
really.
in Austin, around Austin. Lindy's in Florida.
girl, what are you doing with your life in Florida? Come
You would
on.
make a short commute to Coda.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Come here. Come be Texan.
I know. I'm
Come
trying.
on.
I have family in Texas. I'm gonna visit one day. I told you. But I was gonna say, like, what you guys have been
Lies.
saying about the F1 community being like really nice and helpful. That's what I noticed about Threads. Is like when we first brought our personal accounts over there, and then when we made the podcast account, so many people are like so nice and welcoming, and then like you just offered them like people to meet and things to do at Coda. Like it's like what Bree said. It's like there's not a lot of gatekeep. Like if you need help, if you want connections, so many people are willing to give it. But there is times I've noticed where people do get nasty in the comments where they're like, you're a girl, like you probably came here from like TikTok edits, or you just like Lando because he's hot, or like you came here from Drive to Survive. Just like the typical like you're a girl, get out of F1 comment. But I think overall it is very like welcoming.
And truthfully, part of the reason why I haven't faced some of that backlash is because I'm a man. I do appreciate, like, for women in motorsport content, I'm sure you get a lot of this shrapnel from people coming over on Twitter that just want to take shots at you. And I really hate that people feel like they have to gatekeep why people are a fan of the sport. You could be a fan of the sport your whole life. You could have just buttoned into a Drive to Survive, or for wives and girlfriends, or whatever angle of the sport interests you. That's fine. It grows the sport. It makes it better. There's worthy content around it. So gatekeeping's gotta go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Agreed.
enough of the sport.
I think
one.
I'm pretty sure I'm a DEI hire at this point.
Oh my goodness. And you're totally right.
It's a
Lindy.
joke.
That's right.
It's a joke. It's a joke. Everyone
it?
calm down.
Oh, here we go. She
no,
said,
is
"Is
it?
it really?"
I'll let you two answer that.
Whatever.
So,
You
what's
give
the
us
most
validity.
challenging? Yeah. What's the most challenging aspect of keeping your content fresh and exciting and what's your methodology and your strategy behind that to keep it kind of fresh and engaged and keep the community engaged with it and your audience?
I saw a really interesting quote last year over on LinkedIn that said you can either work in your business or work on your business, but not both at the same time. And I find that it's so hard when you're in the throes of making content to take a step back and say, what's working, what's not working, how do I want to change myself? So I love
Mhm.
breaks like this where I can start thinking about how I want to change things because we're about to head into some back-to-back races. But then I think we have another break between Singapore and Kona, a
Yeah.
nice long
Yeah, we
month
do.
or so break. Well, that would be
Yeah.
another great chance to take that moment to take a step back. So it's
So
typically the
you,
long breaks that I figure out. I look at statistics of which articles are working the best, times that I'm posting, hashtags, length, photos, things like that. What's clicking, and then try to optimize that as best I can.
so you take those breaks and then you take in the data and then you can figure out what's working. Then you can pivot if you want to change something or if you want to go in a different direction before the next session starts.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay,
So I'll look at
gotcha.
Twitter analytics or some of the analytics from Buffer, which I use to cross post, and then just see are there certain times of the day that are hitting content that's not working as well. And then also sort of look at, I have to do this manually, is what are some of the other people in my space doing? Are they posting at
Yeah.
certain times of the day, different content that's hitting for them that I should be checking up to? But then all the while, I think the biggest struggle, Chris, is just trying to do it with my life going on. So I've got two young kids at home. I've got a 9 to 5 job that's really involved. So how do I
I
make all
was
of that growth work? Because I'm hungry for it, but it's also just logistically really hard with
That
everything else
was
going
my
on.
side question because I've got a 9 to 5 plus more, and then I've got two kids as well. So that was going to be a side question. I don't even know if it's on our agenda, but yeah, if this was your full-time job or not. So it
No.
sounds like you have a full-time job. You're doing this as just to kind of, that's what I'm doing too. I let the girl, to be honest and fully transparent, these two girls run everything here. I just show up as a host. Like seriously, they do all the work because I have to work and I have other stuff going on. But Lindy and Bree, run the show. I just show up to host.
Well, you
And
all
with
do a
Q.
wonderful job. So I'm glad. I really enjoy when it all comes together for the three of you. I totally
Oh,
agree,
thank
Chris.
you.
It's super
Thanks.
hard balancing just everything, and because work and family are the two most important things, trying to how does the third most important thing? How do you make it all work with all the demands of it all? So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
It's when you look at the iceberg of what content creators are going through, people only see the videos or you on the at circuits or having fun with other creators, but they don't see all that lies underneath it and trying to keep everything afloat behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
That's funny.
Agreed.
That makes
Preach.
me think of a side question too. So kind of like what Chris was saying. So with like your personal life, your job, like how do you balance your passion for the F1 Fantasy League without feeling like the content you make is like a burden, like without feeling burnout, like, oh, I have to make this content because like these people are expecting me to like dish out content. Like how do you balance the line between passion and burnout and like feeling like it's a have to?
Well, I'll let you know when I successfully do that, Lindy. So, so right now I'm pumping out content as best as I can, and I just have to keep reminding myself, do the best you can. This is something that if work or family needs you, you can just snap your fingers and turn it off and put your phone down. The internet doesn't exist anymore. So I have to keep telling myself that there are tons of times where I'm feeling some of that burnout, particularly when you have triple headers like we had one in the first half of the season. I think we have two
Yeah.
in the second half. So you're going to go just straight from consuming a race to preparing for the next one, and it's just show after show after show. So it's a lot of communication with my wife to make sure, hey, these are when I plan on doing shows, when I plan on writing my articles. Does this work for your schedule and our family? And then also obviously checking my work calendar. And if something's that I don't, unfortunately, it's content stuff first, and then I rely on the rest of my team. Luckily, that's the beauty of working on a team for my show, is that if I'm unable to prepare for an episode, I'll just show up like Chris had just admitted to a little while ago, and the rest of the team will have visuals, a show, agenda, everything ready to go. I'll just pop onto it. So one of the many benefits of working with the team.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
Chris is definitely a tool, though. Not a tool.
Let's clarify.
Thanks.
A tool in a toolbox, okay. He is so valuable though, because honestly, he does the stuff that we can't do, which is to crisp lane. And we need crisp laning because he really does break things down in such a very easy to consume way that it does not make you feel dumb for asking the question. It makes you feel really empowered for feeling the need to ask the question, and he was there to support you in that. So like we really value our tool. We value him so much.
I found the final clip of this he sent us.
I unfortunately have no filters, so that happens a lot.
Wow.
But I know that I was talking to you on email. And you asked me a very good question, which was, should I prepare anything? So what is your biggest tip? What is your biggest gut feeling right now as we head into the Dutch Grand Prix and our second half of the year?
I think McLaren's going to continue this momentum. They put two drivers at the top of the grid every race, no matter how the track is set up, the weather conditions. It looks like both drivers are comfortable in really any situation. So I think McLaren will slowly eat into that Red Bull constructors that could potentially pass them if Perez can't get his act together in the next few races. What will be really interesting is that they have this September deadline to sign Liam Lawson or let him loose. And so signing Liam Lawson probably means parting ways with an RB driver or Checo to do it. So this next month is going to be really critical for the constructors and the future of two of these teams. So I'm keeping a close eye on McLaren.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we all are.
Really fast. They're a beast this season.
They are.
They fixed that car really quickly.
Lindy's like, that's my team.
Yeah, listen.
Oh my
when
gosh.
Chris was like,
She's a diehard
Ferrari,
McLaren girl.
I love McLaren. I am. Yep. Papaya girl.
You've been waiting so long for this moment. I love when a non-Red Bull team is winning now. At least some other fan base gets to be happy. So we had these moments with Lando and Oscar winning their first races, and it felt really good to live in that moment, even though I'm not a huge McLaren fan. It was a good moment as that one fan.
Yeah.
And that's funny you bring that up because I'm a Red Bull and Max fan, but I enjoy the sport a lot more when Ferrari, McLaren, and Williams are doing well because I've been watching the sport since I have to believe this, Lindy, probably the early 90s. But yeah, so I've been watching the sport forever, and back then, Williams was a beast, McLaren was a beast. Red Bull didn't exist. Ferrari, Schumacher and all that, like you couldn't deny any of those teams. But now it's sad to see the state Williams has been left in, and then how McLaren got neglected for so long too. But I think the sport does better overall when Ferrari, McLaren, and Williams can compete and be competitive. Mercedes, I don't care for, but that's a different story. Did we lose Lindy?
I think she did. She'll pop back in. Her thing does that a lot.
Oh, okay. Anyways, but yeah, no, I agree with you. Not a huge McLaren fan or Merc fan or Ferrari fan, but I enjoy it when it's competitive. Even as a Max fan, I'm so sick of hearing that you have to land them. It's getting out my god again.
It's good to have some parity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And even as a Lewis fan, those years where he was so dominant, it was nice to see a little bit of the competition, even when Rosberg was going head to head. But then it was good to see just something hooking up. Because even when you're running away and winning it, you want to feel like you've competed for something. It makes it even sweeter when you do break through.
I think the budget can't afford that. I think it is.
Yeah, hopefully we get one more good season of this, and then really everything's upside down from 2026. So hopefully we get the same sort of Harry in 2 years too.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm back in.
That's awesome. Yeah, hi, Lindy. Welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, that's so funny.
I have
That's
two quick
funny.
questions though. I feel like we'll probably want to wrap it up soon, but there were two questions that I was like trying really hard not to forget. The first one being when you first started, the fantasy league, did you ever think that you would have the platform you do now, that like Did you ever have long-term goals for it, or was it just something you were doing for fun?
No way. And part of the reason why I have to make this change from F1 Fantasy HQ is I started it as this anonymous thing. I'd just be F1 Fantasy HQ, this anonymous profile on Twitter with this anonymous website, and if everyone hates it, I shut it down and it's never associated with me again. It's like it never happened. But
Yeah.
then slowly, as I started getting into my show, started having more video content, my face is out there. I changed to using my given name in all of my social profiles. Now all of a sudden I'm into it a bit more, and so this has exceeded all of my wildest imaginations last year, starting things off. And now that things are rolling, now I'm ambitious. I want to figure out how I can take this thing up a notch. So it's crazy how far things have come in just a year now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. And my second question is, throughout your whole experience here, doing everything you're doing, what is like the most memorable like moment or interaction that you've had with maybe someone who works in F1, just a super fan? Just like what has been a moment that has really stuck out to you?
The things that I've enjoyed the most are the celebration moments, and there's two that stand out to me. One is when F1 randomly emailed me back in February and said, "Hey, we have these featured leagues, and everyone in the world is going to see your podcast among the top 10 leagues in the whole world. Do you want to do this?" In that moment of calling Greg and calling Rob and saying, "Oh my gosh, how quickly can we get together and put all of this together? Isn't this the greatest thing ever?" So we had that moment. And then also when we got Laura on the show, this moment where she started following us on our socials, I quickly DM'd her. She said, "Yeah, I'll come on your show." And that was just such a huge surprise as someone with her, um, just of her fame and recognition in the sport, being willing to come on the show and talk about something she's passionate about. So those were two moments where we got good news. We got to celebrate as a team. It really felt like we were doing something positive with moving the game along. So those moments really stick out as the best of times.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's
fun.
pretty validating.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Kind of what everyone wants right now.
And we got very
That's
lucky.
great.
We had a meeting with the F1 Fantasy product team in July, right at the start of the summer break. And so we're going to have regular meetings with them every few months for the rest of the season. And we're starting to collaborate on how we get the second half league out in front of everybody. So hopefully now it's a continuum where in the off season we'll bring some of our feedback on how we can make the game better and some ways that we can work even closer with them in 2025. So hopefully it's the start of something nice.
That's so cool.
Perfect. Sounds
Yeah.
exciting.
Hey. Congrats.
Thank you.
Like, seriously, that's a lot of hard work. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hard work pays
respectable,
off.
that's for sure.
Hard work pays off.
Oh my goodness.
Well-
It's been a wild ride, but I'm really grateful that we have such a great community, other great faders like yourself that we can all share on too. It's been fun in a number of ways.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, let's I value your time. We all value your time. So let's probably wrap things up. But where can everyone find you if you want to do some shameless plugs?
Oh my goodness. It might be different between the time I tell you this and the time this episode is.
True.
But right now, it's
Well,
at
keep
F1
us updated
Fantasy
so when we
on
upload.
Twitter,
Oh.
Instagram, Threads, TikTok, F1FantasyHQ.com. The Fantasy Formula podcast is available on Spotify and Apple and YouTube. And of course, I'll start moving my writing over to Fanium.com on beginning of this week for our Zandvoort preview. So lots of fun places to find me, and I'll be sure to update you all through those socials if I change my handles or any of those other
Perfect.
things. So
That's what I was
it
going
won't
to
be
say. That
lost
way
if
we
you
can
listen
add
to
your
this
links.
episode.
Yes, thank you. That would be great.
All right, Bree, you want to close us
Awesome.
out?
I sure will. Watch the magic happen. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. That's it, guys. Well, at the end. Thank you, Adam, for all of your wonderful time spending this morning with us. It's been a pleasure and honestly one of the best interviews we've had. So it's been great. We wish you all the best and to keep working hard. You are killing it out there and we are very proud of you. And we will keep plugging away shamelessly all of your projects that you have upcoming, so everybody can get the word out. But thank you so much for stopping by this morning.
Oh, Brie, you're making me blush. Thanks so much for having
Oh.
me. It's such a pleasure talking to you all, and I can't wait to celebrate your successes on the One Stop in the coming months.
Thank
Keep
you.
in touch. Thank you.